Welcome to The Work of Warriors, a podcast dedicated to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kim Ravage. This podcast is dedicated to the artists we've lost to mental health, addiction, and suicide, and to those who are still suffering in silence. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. You know, oftentimes when we have found ourselves in a career that we love, a career that we're good at, and maybe even we're really successful at, we can often get caught up with the idea that that's where we're going to be forever. But the truth is, and the beautiful thing about today's world, ingenuity and entrepreneurship, is that we can shift. We can make a shift. You know that I used to be a therapist, and now I'm a mental wellness coach in the entertainment industry. And today's guest was also in the entertainment/film industry and made a huge shift and is now a life coach and a motivational speaker. You can find him on YouTube. He has a TEDx talk about living with purpose. And I love his story. Today will be my first live conversation with him, so I'm so excited to introduce to you today's guest, Imari Tuakli.
Hey.
Hey, Imari, how are you?
What's up? What's happening?
So you and I were connected, Imari, through a mutual connection, I believe, right? Ian Chi?
Yes, correct. Accurate.
How do you know Ian?
Ha! Well, besides loving that man, he's just a very inspirational, wonderful human being. I feel like the embodiment of everything that is creative. But we worked together at Jubilee, which is the company that I used to direct videos for, and he was the creative director. And that's where we crossed paths for the first time, but we've been friends ever since, even though we both have moved on to different chapters of our lives.
Yeah. So can you say a little bit about your work in the film industry? Because, you know, that's the Work of Warriors is primarily dedicated to the entertainment industry, to the creative arts, to filmmaking, actors, musicians, etc. And I know you have a lot of experience, and I want to talk about your shift as well. But can you say a little bit about what you've done in the film industry and how you got there?
Yeah, 100%. I'll give you the short to medium history so that we don't bore anybody. But first of all, I've just always, specifically recently, but I think throughout the course of being Imari, I've always found life to be fascinating, interesting, and worth commenting on. Just the human experience. I feel like none of us reflect on it enough. And I think people who have that perspective often find themselves as artists because I think they are trying to make sense of what it means to be a human being. Right. And so, in high school, I didn't really care about education. I was just, doing it because that's what I was supposed to do. And then I ended up in a film class, I guess you would call it, like junior year. And I remember the first time that I knew that this was going to have an impact on my life because it was the first time I ever worked on a school project where I lost track of time. Right. Most of the time, in school projects, you're like watching the clock, like, oh my God, it's only been 7 minutes, but editing a video, it was a little short film I did, but it was the first time I looked up and I was like, oh, that was 9 hours. And I was like, oh, wow. And so that was kind of my introduction to film. And then, so I studied it in college. I got my, media degree. And I started my first production company in college. And it was all about me wanting to make videos that I felt commented on the human experience, inspired the human experience. So I had plenty of opportunities to do things that, would have made me more money than those things. But I was committed. I was very, for better or for worse, I was captured by this idea of making content that I feel like matters and that would inspire people. And so I did that for a couple of years, probably like 6 or 7 years. And eventually I went to Oakland and I was assistant directing over there. And then I got asked to direct videos at Jubilee. So left my company behind, left the other companies behind, and I started directing at Jubilee. When I started working at Jubilee, they had like 300,000 subscribers. And the only reason, just to be frank and transparent, the only reason I even said yes to Jubilee is because they had a mission, right? Their mission was like, how can we make videos that bridge people together? How can we create empathy through these videos? Uh, and in my mind, prior to moving to LA, I was like, oh, everybody in LA is so Hollywood and nobody makes anything meaningful. So I was actually never going to move to LA. So, you know, for what it's worth, shout out to Jubilee for making me make that move. Um, so yeah, I ended up at Jubilee, and I created a couple series for them that did very well. And now that they're at 8 million subscribers, if not more, but we started at 300,000 subscribers when I got there, and I created a lot of series for them that really brought a lot of my thought patterns and ways that I view the world into some of their work, and really stretch the imagination of what we could do with this video thing that would inspire people to be human and be better humans and reflect on themselves and the world and those kind of things. So officially I directed videos for like 9 years across my career. And I left that stage of my life in 2019. Kind of hard to keep track. I need to read my Wikipedia page.
And where did you go? What was the shift and why? What happened? Because I feel like I have bits and pieces for, what I've researched about you, but
Yeah.
I wanna understand. So
Yeah. Hear it directly from the
and we
source.
do similar work. And so the fact that we're doing this together and, we've both had this experience of shifting careers, right? I used to be a
Mhm.
therapist
Mhm.
and, now you've made a shift. So tell us about
Definitely
that.
made a shift. Yeah. It's funny because the way that it stores in my mind is like actually after Jubilee, it all really got started. But I think that's not fair to the life that I lived prior. That was still a whole lot of chapters of my life. But and I think that this is how we get connected. And I think a lot of the resonance that we have is that, I was directing videos at Jubilee, and in many ways on paper, I was successful and I was getting everything that I wanted, right? I was always like, man, I want to create content that I care about and I want to reach millions of people. It's like I did that. And I got hundreds of millions of people who have seen my stuff. I mean, check the numbers, probably like 500 million now, right? There's a lot of people who have seen my work. And I have the accolades, and I was depressed and I was burnt out and I was unhappy, unfulfilled, and I was not on a path that was going to reverse, right? It wasn't going to the fulfillment wasn't going to happen by accident.
Yeah.
Right. And so Ian can attest to this, but towards the end of my career at Jubilee, I was like a shell of a man. I was like a husk. I was not inspired, which is like the exact opposite of who I am at my core. I was not inspired. I was not motivated. And yeah, I was going down fast. And um, I try to say this as lovingly and respectfully as possible. I think the higher ups at Jubilee didn't know how to handle that. They didn't know how to nurture what I needed. And so when they saw that the output wasn't the same from this guy, they let me go. And they fired me. Kind of not kind of pretty unceremoniously. Yeah. And it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me by far because
Goosebumps.
it it gave me the opportunity to look at the reasons why this wasn't satisfying me and what I needed and who I was as a human being. And so I actually ended up coincidentally, I ended up in this like leadership development program that was basically like a personal development self-awareness workshop. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know. I was fired, so I had no jobs. I was like, oh, I'll just go to this workshop. It's like not really anything else to do with my life. And so I ended up in this workshop, and it was like seeing a mirror for the first time. Imagine you've gone like 25, 30 years and you've just never looked in a mirror, and you're like, oh, what? And it's just everything changes, right? And so, you know, that workshop introduced me and took me on like a 6 month journey of like self discovery and self improvement and self realization and all these kind of things. And I came out of the film industry a bit jaded and I didn't want to go back. And with this newfound self awareness, I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And actually, one of the first things I wanted to do is I wanted to help other artists. I was like, I want to help give the tools that I found in the self development program to artists and use my credibility as a filmmaker and as a director with all these views to like support them in understanding what is their brand, who are they, and how can they create in a way that doesn't lack creative integrity. Yeah. So I started to coach artists. At first, I was just helping them with branding stuff. And then it became like kind of more so life coaching and self awareness stuff. And that expanded and that grew. And I started to get like invited to like give talks and give workshops. I remember my first my first workshop was in Germany. And I like went over there and I led a workshop for a creative company over there on like how to build a culture, how to build a creative culture that supports artists, that doesn't exploit them. And obviously, coming out of Jubilee, I had a lot of things to think about and to reflect and to share, and my
Mhm.
opinions on how I believe artists should be treated. Because I think that you know a strong statement that I strongly believe is that I think creatives and artists are our greatest human resource. Like without creatives and artists, I am not interested in the world that we would create.
Right.
Like, it's just
Right.
like, I don't want to be there. It doesn't sound like a very inspired place.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe when the world is upside down, it's the artists who save us.
yeah, yeah. And so it would behoove us to take care of them. And
Yes. Amen.
it's
Say that
it.
again.
So if we rely on these people, it's like I think a lot of times, art can be seen as like, oh, it's just like flimsy entertainment, and it's like, no, not at all. If you actually allow yourself to be touched by art, you will be moved, you will be changed, you will be shifted, you will be grown, and like that is not to be taken lightly, right? Like how many times has a good song gotten you out of a depression, right? Like
A
how many
million.
times has a good book opened your mind? So
Yes.
let us take care of the people who are writing songs. Let's take care of the people who are drafting books because without them, we are screwed.
Yeah. Oh, I have goosebumps again. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, just the other day, it was interesting. It just caused me to stop and reflect, and I think you'll appreciate this, but we're a family. We love music. My husband just got this brand new speaker system, and but he went up to test out the speakers, and then my son was in his room, and he had it was three different genres. I had my AirPods in, and it was like, let's all just take a moment of music, but we don't want to do the same thing. So three
Yeah,
different genres for the
I love
same
it.
20 minutes as self care,
Yeah,
even as
100%.
connection. Even though we were in different rooms, it's like we need our
100%.
music, and so
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I love that frame of art as self-care.
yeah,
Um, everybody's like self-care, massages and
yeah. Mm-mm,
facials. It's like I
mm-mm.
remember I'm a very organized and meticulous person, so I have a calendar, right, for just the last X number of years. Like every minute has been scheduled, right? Fortunately and unfortunately. And I remember when I was making my calendar for this quarter, I said every Saturday I need to go do something artistic. Like I need to go to a museum. I need to da 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 da. And of course, that's the first thing that I would always like trash. And I'd be like, oh, I'll do it next week. And oh, it's not important. And da 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 da. And then a couple weeks ago, I went to a museum for the first time in a while, and I was like, oh my god, like there something in me that needed to be fed is now fed. And
Yeah,
wow, I can physically feel the difference between what it's like when it is not fed and when it is fed. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like, just to get philosophical, it's like life is a lot of suffering. We should counteract that with beauty. We should
Yes.
counteract that with inspiration because otherwise, pain and suffering is guaranteed.
Right.
But beauty and art is not.
Mm,
So we should make sure that there is more beauty, more art. We should do what we can to make sure that that is prioritized.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I that this is the conversation that I want to normalize. Pain and suffering is part of being human,
Yes.
right? But we're
Hmm.
raising, well, it's been going on forever, but especially now with social media, we're raising people to believe that if there's successful, right? That's what's going to bring fulfillment. That's what's going to finally make you happy when you know, whether you get the date, you get the partner, you get the job, you get the gig, you get the award, that's going to
Yeah.
be it. And you get it, you got it. And that
Mhm.
wasn't it.
Mhm. Yep.
And I just want to normalize this conversation that the fulfillment. Well, I'll ask you, what would you say? Where does fulfillment come from? You've climbed
Hmm.
the tallest tree, you've had the
Mhm.
success, you've had all the things that
Mhm.
go with it,
Yep, yep.
and you were depressed. And so for
Yeah.
you, where does fulfillment come from?
Oh, we're gonna figure this out together because I was literally just having a conversation about this yesterday.
All right, let's talk.
Just yesterday. Because, with these kind of concepts, I wanna, even when I do coaching, it's very important to me that we don't stay abstract, right? Like we stay as like practical as possible because otherwise, the abstract can only do so much for us.
Yeah.
So I think, we can attempt as best as we can in live live form, try to figure out where does fulfillment come from. I think that fulfillment, I'll give a quick story. So 2 days ago, right behind me, in the room that's behind me, I was hosting a poetry event, right? And I'm very intentional about how I design all my events. Because to me, it's an art. It's crafting an experience, right? And so I was crafting it with my business partner, and we invited these artists, and we designed the room and made everything beautiful, and went through tech issues and whatever. And people came by, and people had a great time, and it was amazing. And the next morning, we both woke up, and we were having a conversation, and we said that we don't feel fulfilled by that. And we were like, like, what is that? Why is that? Because I've been working on a lot of different projects, and I've noticed a pattern where I'll finish a very difficult project and I don't feel fulfilled. But at the same time, there are projects that I put a lot of effort into and I do feel fulfilled. So I was trying to like deduce what's the difference? Like, why is that? Right. And I do think that there is something to say about fulfillment being tied to giving your best, like doing your best. Right. I don't know how likely you are to feel fulfilled by something that you half-assed. Right.
Hmm.
But I do think that there's a question like what even beyond that, like what do I need in order to feel like this was worth it? Was worth the time and worth the effort? And is it like it makes me feel a sense of purpose, right? Makes me feel like am I trying to create connection from these things, right? Like Tony Robbins, who I'm sure, people are pretty familiar with, he talks about the six core needs, and the six core needs are like the things that motivate people to do anything, right? And it's like you're doing something because A, you want certainty, or B, because you want variety, or three, because you want significance or contribution or growth. And people can look up what the whole list is. But I remember like if you are trying to if you're trying to do something and get one of those needs met that actually isn't important to you, then you're going to feel unfulfilled, right? Like, for example, I think you brought up like the idea of like you got famous, so significance, right? But then maybe
Hmm.
you get significance and you're like, that's actually not what I wanted. Maybe what I wanted was connection, right? And I think that uh, for me, I know that one of my prime motivators is connection. So if I
Absolutely.
if I do a poetry event and I don't feel like super connected to people, or I don't feel very seen or understood by people, then it doesn't actually feel very fulfilling,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think that in order to feel fulfilled, everybody has to truthfully ask themselves, really hold up the mirror, what actually moves you? What actually makes you feel complete, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Connection is not simplistic either because for me,
Right.
I want authentic connection with other creative, kind humans. But
Hmm.
also, what I had to learn through my journey was I was connecting with a lot of people and I was
Hmm.
impacting a lot of people, but I wasn't fully connected to myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that is also just really important to understand what does that mean?
Yeah.
How do you do that? What makes you feel alive? What brings you
Right.
joy? And
Right.
so that we're not dependent on that other connection because I think we connect better with each other when we're taking care of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thread because, we're on this podcast to talk about artists and creatives, right? And I don't think artists make good art if they're not if they're not connected to themselves,
Yeah.
right? And I have seen and been
Mhm.
the artist who is creating because that's what's expected of me, or like I have some producer who needs me to do whatever. I'm not connected to what actually moves me, and like if I don't know what actually stimulates me, what actually generates my curiosity, what actually then it's like telling somebody to write a poem about trees when they don't care about trees. It's like the poem's not going to be very good. It's not. But if you know somebody who's just like fascinated by how bark looks like this and how trees have gnarled fingers, and you
Yeah.
have them write a poem, it's like, okay, cool. The poem's going to be different. Artists being connected to themselves and knowing what moves them, touches them is massively important.
Yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
makes me think, when like what you're talking about, if you have a producer or someone else, dictating your art, it can lead to burnout and
Yes.
frustration, and you lose your inspiration, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think also, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were like, well, I just wish, and, I won't say what they do, but I wish that thing that I do would just take off a little more. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we lose the reality that if you're an artist, you're an artist. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
musician, you're a musician. And
Mm-hmm.
only you need to decide how far you want or need to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes artists forget that once you quote unquote make it to where, society says you're supposed to, which I don't buy into,
Mm-hmm.
you lose a lot of freedom. You lose a lot of creative freedom. You
Mm-hmm.
lose financial freedom. You lose trust. Now
Mm-hmm.
you have people in your life who want something from you. They want what you
Mm-hmm.
can produce.
Mm-hmm.
There's loss that comes with success. Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, for privacy reasons, I'll keep her name confidential. But I was talking to a friend yesterday. I live in LA, so it's very we see the extremes of this spectrum.
Mhm,
And I was talking to a friend yesterday, and her one of her family members is essentially like Hollywood royalty, right? Like
mhm,
extremely well known person. And she was talking about how that person loves what they do, right? That is their craft. And at the same time, when it was revealed how talented they are and they got all the success, now they feel like they can't trust people because now everybody wants something from them and da 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 da. And I think that it is the paradox of being an artist, right? It's like, I do think that there is, for me personally speaking, like this inherent call to share, right? Like
mhm.
not just to create, but to share and to like show somebody, be like, hey, this is how I'm looking at life. What do you think about it? Right. And, you know, I think that in of itself is a scary process because you're allowing yourself to be judged and people are like, oh, that's gross or that's weird or that doesn't look very
Yeah.
good, but that's weird, right? But then what if you do show somebody and all of a sudden everybody's like, wow, they make really cool stuff. And now all of a sudden, people who don't understand where that art comes from are trying to put it in a box and matriculate it and like adjust it and manipulate it and in a way are manipulating and putting you in a box as well when it's just like, hey man, I just want to express. I just have to express, right?
Right.
And I think that, you know, my heart goes out and my compassion goes out to every single artist because I know how difficult it is to balance those two things.
Yeah, for sure. And you said at the beginning, artists create to express how they're experiencing life,
Yes.
right? And when someone else starts to manage that or produce that or edit it their own way, they're saying, "Well, no, actually, this is how you see life." Like they're
Yeah,
taking your
exactly.
reality and
Exactly.
making it someone else's to please the masses, if you will.
Right, right.
And then there's, you and I both have just seen it all too often. There's just it, not only the loss of everything we just mentioned, but the loss of self. And
Mhm.
that's devastating.
Yeah. And that's just going to be another burnt out, dried up artist who is just like another person in the pipeline that there's like, all right, we're done using this one. Where's the next one that we can just kind of squeeze dry? And it's like, don't, that's, that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, as an artist, because even, and again, we haven't even talked to what you're doing now, but as an artist, what do you do on a regular basis? You said, you do kind of like, I don't know, is it like a Julia Cameron artist date, on Saturdays? Are there other daily negotiables that you do to stay connected to yourself and your inspiration and your creativity?
That's a very good question. So a lot of this conversation has been about the overlap between self awareness and artistry, right? And I think that so I journal every day, right? I journal every day for like maybe like 30, 45 minutes, right? And it's part of just getting what is in me out, right? And a lot of times, I'll be journaling about, I feel this way about this girl, or oh, I'm hungry, or oh, trauma, whatever. And then a lot of times, like just in the self expression process, all of a sudden I'll have an idea or have a thought about life. And then I will, in midstream of the journaling, it'll turn into like a poem. Right? It's like it goes from like, oh, the girl in breakfast, and oh my god, the idea of breakfast, and what is love and breakfast, and like all of a sudden it becomes like a thing, right? So I think that making that time for my mind to just do what it wants to do is like quintessential for me. And I do that first thing in the morning before I, get sucked up in what everybody else needs from me and meetings and blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. It's like,
Yeah. Well, that's such a way to connect, right? Connect to
yeah,
yourself. Are
yeah.
you familiar with Julia Cameron, the artist way?
I'm familiar with
So,
Artist Way. Yeah, I didn't know it was
yes,
Julie
I
Cameron.
think her
Yeah,
name's Julia Cameron, but she talks about
yeah,
morning pages where,
yeah,
you write 4 pages handwritten
yeah.
first thing in the morning before you do anything to clear
Just
everything you
get it
carried
out.
over. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that you can get to the good stuff. So
yeah,
that's what I
100%. And
have me.
honestly, like, I think that's where something I'm trying to work on right now is like, I can tell that's where that's when my best ideas come out. It's actually not so much like when I have a 2 p.m. brainstorm meeting and, it's actually, that's not where my best stuff comes. My best stuff comes when it's just an orgasm of ideas at the beginning of the day. It's just like, here's everything. Let me just throw it out. Right. And because there's not that container that's being forced around it, it's not like there's no agenda to it. That's when like the best stuff comes. The best stuff.
So I'm super curious because this is something that I work on. It's one of my daily non-negotiables. But do
Mhm.
you journal before you look at your phone?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
I
if,
think once we do this, for me it's over.
yeah, yeah.
Once I look at my
Once
phone,
you've done that, the day's done.
the rest of the world just entered, my space and my brain and my bed, right? Like it's there. And now I have
Right.
to respond. So oftentimes it's a hard shift for people to make to tend to themselves and their own
Hmm.
journaling, creativity, whatever it may be, before they let the rest of the world in. But I think it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Essential.
Yeah.
Absolutely essential. I
Essential.
think it's one thing that I do, not just journal, but I also read my journals. So like at the end of the month, I go back and I just read, what did I write every single day for the last 30 days. And it's just so useful because one, I get to like just see patterns of ways of thinking or like, people that are bugging me or whatever. But then sometimes I'll like wander upon a poem and be like, oh wow, this is amazing. I like forgot I wrote this, So that's
Yeah,
great.
I go through a cycle of like, I want to write. I am a writer. And then I write and I'm like, oh, I'm not a very good writer. And then I go back and read it and I'll transfer it like to a document. I'm like, that was really pretty
This
good.
is amazing. Yeah.
It's a cycle like going through over and over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. With like the poetry event I told you about the other day, I read some poetry, and like when I was performing it, I was like, this is okay. And then like somebody recorded it, and I watched it after. I was like, oh, I like that. That was great.
Our own worst critic, right?
Yeah, I know. It's wild.
Daily non negotiables that you have.
Mm. I have a couple. I mean, like I have a morning routine, move my body, get blood flowing. But those aren't necessarily related to my artistry. Um, take regular breaks, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But
I think the physical stuff is just all connected to the mental stuff too, though. I think it
100%.
I think it does help
Yeah,
because
I
it's
think
again
it's
it's that connection.
yeah, and I think it's what you're you were saying about like clearing out the mind, I do think that there's like this idea of just like clearing out the cache, right? Sometimes if I'm like stuck mentally and then I go on a run or I do a workout and then I come back and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like there is more creative possibility here than I thought before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would encourage people not to think that that there is not a tie between your physical well-being and your artistic and creative inspiration well-being. Like those are
Yeah.
definitely tied in together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the shift that you made and the exciting things you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting time in my life because, like we talked about earlier in the episode, it was like, okay, cool. Mari's a filmmaker for like 8 or 9 years. He got disillusioned from a lot of that. And then I moved into coaching and speaking. And I've been doing that for 6, 7 years now. Um, Spoken all over the world, spoken at Google, spoken at Harvard, and get my TED Talk and all these cool things. And it's interesting. It's like a beautiful full circle moment because I don't find myself feeling the pull to get back into film industry necessarily, but I do find myself getting back interested in the idea of like creating my own content because again, this idea of like, I was coaching and I was helping people for a while, but there was this artistic itch that wasn't being scratched, right?
Yeah.
Like outside of helping people, I just want to express my ideas about world and life and culture and all these things, right? So, that itch has been getting louder and louder in the last like year or two. And so a couple months ago, I just committed to just being like, you know what, I'm back in. Um, I might as well use this film industry ability that I have to like, set these cameras up and get these lights moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started a little YouTube talk show with a friend of mine a couple months ago, and very excited about that. And it's actually really relevant to what you're talking about. It's like I know I'm not doing this for views. I know I'm like not motivated by like subscriber count. It's like I've done that. I've been there. I already know what that is like, right? I'm literally doing this because I want to express myself. And like if I don't, I know that there will be a part of me that is always unfulfilled and
Mm.
always unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
feels like I can feel the authenticity.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the Tony Robbins 6 core needs that I was talking about earlier. Um, I feel like he should add one more, which is just expression, self-expression.
Mm.
I feel like
Yeah.
people sometimes are motivated to do something because they just want to express. And that's where I'm at. I literally feel like spiritually sick if I hold my ideas in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with your experience of having, millions of views and having your work take off and being successful and having it, you know, not promise what the world tells us it'll do for you.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is an artist, maybe, a young artist or a new artist or in the middle or, an artist who feels like, well, I haven't quote unquote made it, but like
Hmm.
there's this pressure of social media,
Hmm.
and I think we can so easily get caught up in like, how many people did see my video? And, it's that like, well, only 1,000 people saw it. And it's like, well, but if 1,000 people stopped you on the street and said, good job,
Right.
I really like what you're doing, we would be
Right.
blown away.
Ecstatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
But what would you say to an artist who's like, how do I navigate the social media pressure
Mm,
without losing myself? How do I stay
mm,
authentic without losing myself? Because I'm always like, I can't do the performance videos. If you see me
no.
doing a video, it's because I think it was really funny or cute, or it was
Exactly.
just something I just really had to get off my chest. But I
Yeah.
can't, how do people, what would you say to an artist who feels that pressure that we're all kind of, all entrepreneurs and artists are feeling?
Yeah. I get it. And like deep compassion and deep empathy because have been there as well. Right. Um, and I think my advice is different depending on where you are in your creative journey. I think if you are at the beginning of your creative journey or beginning a new creative project, like I am with this new talk show,
Mhm.
it's like establish good habits early, right? Right now. It's important when you have one subscriber. And one of my new habits is I do not read comments. I'm not going to open them. I don't care if it's people being like, "Wow, he's the most handsome and hilarious, well-spoken." Like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch my follower count. I don't want to watch these numbers because I know that is the slipperiest slope. Right? So
Yeah.
I just am establishing a habit for myself. Just don't open the comments, no matter what. Even though it's so tempting and they make it so easy. So a notification pops up, somebody comments. Like, it's just so easy to press it, right? But just make a habit now so that when you have 500,000 comments, you don't find yourself for hours scrolling and be like, it's just establish a good habit now, right? Because look, man, like, it's almost cliche how many times we've heard the story of the artist who like gets burnt out or gets caught up in, what people think about them. And it's like, we've heard this before. We've heard the story of the person who seeks the validation and doesn't end up happy
Yeah.
more times than we've heard about people who seek validation and end up happy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we know that that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So take the advice that is being offered and the lesson that's being offered by the world. But you've never heard an artist who says, I prioritize my self expression and who ends up unfulfilled.
Right.
So prioritize that, focus on that. That is your most important thing. That at the end of the day, you can say, I said what I needed to say, I made what I needed to make. Prioritize that, let that be the most important.
Yeah.
You know? And I know it can be difficult, like, when you start talking about like, oh, what if I turn my art into my livelihood and now there's money connected and I get it. I get it. But you have to establish really early on, like, what is the most important thing to you here? Like, is the most important thing to you to be like self-expressed? Is the most important thing to make money? Is the most important thing the validation? It's like, all those are fine, right?
Mhm.
But just get super clear and optimize for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such good wisdom.
Yeah. So that's my advice. If you're like just starting out, just don't wait until you have pressure to form new habits because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. You want to be
Yeah.
able to like I actually I'm grateful to young Imari because early in my film career I committed to making videos that mattered. Like I was
Mhm.
like, I'm not going to make dumb commercials about Colgate. Like I'm not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that that meant there were going to be times where I was broke, and there
Mm.
were 100%. There definitely were. But I was like, I know what my priority is from the beginning. But if at the beginning I was like, oh, I just want to make videos, then it's like, ooh, that can get dangerous. That can get real dangerous real fast. So I would say, honestly, wherever you are on your journey, stop, pause, and ask yourself, what's actually important to me? What kind of content is important to me? What results are important to me? What do I want the process to feel like while I'm
Mhm.
creating? And how can I design that in a very practical way?
Yeah. I love that. And
Yeah.
don't worry about the numbers or the views or the follows or the likes or comments. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, you get the views and the likes, and it's like not even that big a deal. It's
Right.
really like because
Right.
all of a sudden it becomes not about people. Like now it's a number. You don't think
Yep.
about a million people. You just think a million followers. And it's like a
Right.
number. I
Yep.
distinctly remember the night where I got my first million view video, and this was before everybody got millions of views. This was like back in the day, and I remember, my first time where a video went viral, and I was like, I feel no different,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I just feel more pressure to make sure the next one goes viral. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to set myself up for that. It's not
Yeah.
a lifestyle
Yeah.
I look forward to.
Thank thank you for your honesty because I'm so well, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm concerned about our youth who are being
Hmm.
raised by that goal.
Yeah, yeah,
That going viral is going to change your life. I know people who have gone viral and it changed their life, but not in the best way.
not the way that you wanted.
Yeah. And even when it does go well, it doesn't give you there's nothing that can fulfill you if you're not fulfilled within yourself and if you're not being true and authentic to who you truly are.
Yeah, yeah,
And when you are attuned to yourself and truly authentic, then you have boundaries. Then you can stay aligned to your own values. Like you were talking about early
Hmm.
in your career, you're like, I know what I want. I know what I'm willing to do. I know what I'm not willing to do.
Yeah.
And I love myself and I radically accept myself to the point where no one's going to shift that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's powerful. And I think
Yeah.
people are more successful that way because they're more fulfilled. So you get to define success
Yeah.
instead of, outsiders or your followers or whatever.
Yeah. It's getting clear on principles and values. What is actually important to me? Right. And then also, for people who might not be as practiced in this kind of like self-awareness work, it's just like, just ask why like 10
Mhm,
times.
mhm.
Ask yourself, what do you want? And then ask yourself, why? Well,
Yeah.
why? Well, why? And then eventually you'll find something, right? Like for me, I was like, I want to make videos. Okay, well, why?
Why?
Because I like ideas being spread. It's like, okay, well, why? Because I think
Mhm,
that if people have different ideas, then they do different things. And that's how they change. And I was like, oh, okay. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to change people. I'm trying to impact people. I'm trying to create viral adjustments to how we as humans operate, right? It's like, and videos help me do that because it's like not just an idea in my head anymore. Now it's an idea in a million people's head. Now it's an idea in 10 million people's head. So I know if I'm spreading an idea, I want it to be an integrity, an idea that I feel good about. So
mm. Yeah,
rather than I just want to go viral because I did a backflip on Mount Everest, it's like, okay, well, you know,
yeah,
what did
yeah,
what did this do for anybody?
yeah. So ask like 10 layers of why,
Why?
right? Really
Why?
get to the root.
Yeah.
And I think people would be astonished by what they find when they get 7 to 10 layers deep. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you really get to your heart. There can be a lot of emotion that comes with that, sometimes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of grief. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's the real reason why you're here and what
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
called to do.
And that's going to be what moves you through the sometimes inevitable struggle of being an artist.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have a lot of motivation to move through struggle if you don't even know why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. A warrior is someone who fights for themselves first, takes
Hmm.
care of themselves so that they can have a greater impact.
Hmm.
What is a freedom fighter?
I love that. Good question. Uh, Ironically enough, so uh, my name, Imari Adeola Samora Anderson Tuakli, three of those names are, I was named after freedom fighters
Mm,
and they were fighting for different things. So this is a very fun question for me. uh, for me, uh, freedom is like my top value.
mm,
I think that without freedom, I wouldn't be able to find fulfillment, for example, right? Because then if I'm in a box, then I'm chasing somebody else's fulfillment. I'm chasing somebody else's ideas. And so I think that there are people, at least people that I really resonate with, that have this inner urge to make sure that the life that they are living is theirs, that they are not confined by tradition that they don't subscribe to. They're not confined by expectations that they didn't agree to. They're not taking jobs that they were expected to, right? Like they're feeling like I don't want to leave this planet without knowing that that was my life. I designed it. Only I could have lived it, right? And in order to do that, that takes another level of commitment because you have the world's pressure telling you be like this, talk like this, do like this, and like fit into this box. So it is going to be a fight. Like if you do nothing, you will just be molded and you will become what somebody else wants you to become. Right. It's like if every moment of your life and every day you just asked your parents or you asked, your boss, well, what should I do? What should I do? Then they're going to tell you what college you should go to. They're tell you what major you should take. They're going to tell you who you should marry. They're going to tell you what you should name your kids. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, well, why didn't I get to decide any of what my life looked like? Right. And, for some people that's not important and they're okay with going with the script and that's fine. But that is not me.
Mhm.
And that is not why people come to me. People come to me because they are like, I feel like I'm out of integrity with who I am. And it eats at me and I can't sleep and it bugs me. And there is like a physical just dissonance that I feel. Right. And that's why I would call a freedom fighter somebody who's like, I think that there could be more to, there's more, there's a question that is not being asked in my life, individually or in general, that I need to ask before I go.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
When you were talking about, someone who looks up and says, "Well, why didn't I get to decide?" It
Yeah.
made me think of all of the many artists and entrepreneurs who, again, much like yourself, who have climbed the tallest tree and they're like, "I did everything. I did everything I was told to do. I did
Mhm.
everything my followers told me, my manager, my parents, my spouse. I did everything I was supposed to do,
Yeah.
and I'm miserable."
Mhm.
Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah. I try not to project my values onto people because I know they're subjective, but I would say I believe I don't think that you can do what everybody else tells you to do for your entire life and end up happy. I just don't think that that's the case because nobody knows what you need. Nobody knows, right? Like, how would they know?
Right,
Literally, only you could know.
right. Give yourself permission to know, to know
Yes,
yourself and to know your desires
exactly. Exactly.
and
Because,
your own values. Like you said, I don't want to project my values, but you don't want anybody else to have to live by yours, right?
exactly,
It's just it
100%.
all lines up.
Yeah. It's like, we can make a stupid, facetious example. It's like if every time you were hungry, somebody said, well, eat a hot dog, eat a hot dog, eat a hot dog. At some point, you'd ask yourself, do I like hot dogs? do, do I really want this right now? And if I weren't going to eat this hot dog, what would I eat?
Yeah.
Because I think that you would, on your deathbed, after eating a lifetime of hot dogs, be like, I wonder what chicken tasted like. Like, I feel like I should have tried that. you know?
Yeah, we don't want those kind of regrets.
You don't want, yeah, come on now. You don't want to, don't live a hot dog life.
Right, right. And I think if our youth can learn that earlier than
Yeah.
say I did,
Hmm.
um, we will have more peace. We will have more creativity. We will have more
Hmm.
inspiration because we won't have people subscribing to what their peers and social media and all those, you know, irrelevant numbers
Yeah,
offer. Yeah,
100%. And I think that, like, how is that any different than self acceptance?
yeah,
Right? Self acceptance is just saying, oh, this is what makes me unique, different,
yeah,
maybe bad, maybe good, but okay, this is me. Right? And that's just what it is. And I think that if you can do that, if you can look at the part of yourself that might not be, you know, common in your community or expected by your parents and be
mhm,
like, I love it anyway. I'm gonna lean into it anyway. I'm gonna be curious about it anyway. Then all of a sudden, yeah, I think then you'll be much closer to fulfillment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. What would you say to parents who are raising creatives, like artists, kids who maybe don't fit the molds, maybe don't want to play football, maybe
Yeah.
have something entirely different than the family
Yeah.
name that's been, everybody's doctors and this kid doesn't want to be a doctor's kid, wants to paint or sing or whatever. What
100%.
would you say to that parent?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of like, this is a funny idea. I have like a lot of proxy empathy for parents who are not artistically minded who have artistic children because that must be so confusing. Like it just must be like you just have like no frame of reference for what that is. Because I think that if you are an artist parent and you have an artist kid, you get it. Like you're like, I know what that feels like to feel like, I have something I need to get out, right? But you know, I have empathy for parents who just don't understand it. But I think that most, if not all parents want to see their child fulfilled. I assume that most, if not all parents want to see their child happy. And I would encourage you to have some curiosity of like, well, what if them following their passions is actually the only way they are going to get that fulfillment that you say you seek for them? You seek that happiness for them. Because even if you're like, oh, I want them to be a doctor. Well, why do you want them to be a doctor? Because I want them to have stable income. Why do you want them to have stable income? Oh, so that they're happy and they're fulfilled. Okay, great. So you want them to be happy and fulfilled. That's actually what you're desiring right here. Right?
Yeah.
So what if this artist becomes a doctor and they have a stable income and they hate it and they know that they're like, this was not worth it? Because I've seen plenty of people who have died before they got to the deathbed,
Yep.
who move through every day, going through the motions, dead, bored, uninspired, waiting for the casket. And it's
Yep.
like, I would never want that for my child, personally speaking.
Wow. I love that. Yeah. I had the fortunate experience to rediscover creativity essentially when my child was born.
Hmm.
That was when I discovered Brene Brown,
Hmm.
and my son was probably maybe 8, maybe a little younger. I don't even remember, but it started with like creative journaling, and then that led to writing, and it led to like I just like came alive. Like, oh, I have to, like, I need color in my life. I need play, I need paint, I need,
Yeah.
I need to do creative things. And then it was painting furniture and it was all this thing, but fortunately, it allowed me to look at my child and be like, yeah, do whatever you want. And interestingly enough, he is a young filmmaker and wants to, make his own movies, and he's got a very creative spin, but um I'm just grateful that I learned that even though I may not understand, or he may not, fit how society says he should be navigating the world, it just proves over and over. I watch it over and over how things come together when you are
Hmm.
true to yourself, when you are processing life the way that you need to
Hmm.
without anybody else's permission.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a peace that
Yeah.
can happen, right?
Yeah.
And we all want peace for the people that we love. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah. And, there's an irony there that I want to point out. It's like most people, unless you're like weird, love kids, right? And love little babies. It's like, why? Because they look at the world and they're like, wow, it's so new.
Yeah.
That is creativity, like in real time.
Yeah.
Is because and we look at that and we're so inspired by that. We're like, wow, he's so curious about the world. It's like, well, don't ruin that.
Yeah.
Let that live for as long as possible. Because the
Right.
only reason that goes away is because it's taught away. And it's like, oh, well, no, don't ask those questions. Or, oh, no, don't put those things together. Oh, no. It's like, eventually you're just taught to not look at the world as if it's an inspiring place to be.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't make any sense because everybody looks at the people who are inspired and they're like, wow, you're so inspired. It's like, yeah. So don't ruin it.
Right. Right. And that's a lesson for everybody, right? Like, I feel like this part of the conversation, if not all of it, is just so divine because literally 2 days ago a picture popped up. We have one of those screensavers on our TV where it's our, pictures. And it was a
Mhm.
picture of my son when he was little, and I was like, "Oh, I miss that." Like I don't miss him. I'm not happy with him, at 18.
Yeah.
But I was like, "What do I miss?" Right? Stay curious and compassionate. I miss his innocence. I
Mm.
miss his view of the world before it beat him up, which
Yeah,
it's happened
exactly.
to all of us,
Yeah.
especially that middle school age. But like, I just miss that innocence, like all the wonder, seeing the
Mm.
everyday wonders,
Mhm.
as opposed to like someday I'll be happy. It's like, no, I'm happy right now. Look at this
Mm.
rock,
Yeah,
right? And
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so can we all foster that and
Mhm.
help each other and not try to talk people out of anything that might
Mm.
be unconventional or more creative than you know what to do with, and just stay curious and keep encouraging each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. for the good of them as individuals and for the good of us as humanity, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
if everybody who has made amazing things in the world, whether it's, rocket ships or paintings or statues or songs, like if all those people had gotten jaded, we would all be worse off.
I
So,
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I love your perspective. I love your energy. I'm really grateful that you're here, and that
likewise.
you've participated in the work of warriors. You're coaching and you're speaking. And so I think it's worth noting, how can people find you?
Yeah, of course. So you can always find me through my website, imarituakli.com. IMARITUAKLI.com. It's a good way to book me for speaking, good way to find me for coaching, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm all over the internet. You can just type my name, you'll find something. No guarantees on what you'll find though. Yeah, so I'm all over, but the best way to just find me direct, especially for any like work related stuff, is just imarituakli.com.
Yeah. Who would
Yeah.
be like your ideal coaching client? Like, how would someone, if they're
Mm.
an artist, how would they know, like, this is a good fit if?
Mm. Very good question. I The one word that comes to my mind is visionary. Like if you are a visionary, an ambitious visionary, you're like, I am here to make, be, or do something that is beyond anything that has existed before, then we should work together. Right? Like if you're, I've worked with people in the past who are just like, oh, I'm just trying to like, be more confident. It's like I've helped them, but like the people who really find the best success and who I most personally enjoy, like people who are like artists, people who are visionaries, people who are leaders, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like creative painting music types. Like I work with like startup CEOs who are like
Yep.
visionary, like I'm trying to create something that has never been created before. And those are the people who um, I love working with because like we just talked about in this conversation, it's like so much of what you create and the satisfaction of what you create comes from, do you know who you are? And can you own who you are? Have you asked why enough times? You know what I mean? Like those kind of conversations. And that's a lot of what comes up in the, coaching container is like, how can we really find out who you are as a leader, as a visionary, as an ambitious creative? And then how can we form your life around that so that it's, yes, financially sustainable and all these things, but more than anything, it feels authentically stable. Like you can create and stay who you are the whole time.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone who listens to this checks out your TED Talk and your website. And yeah, I will be contacting you offline for some other stuff. But thank you for thank you for participating in the work of warriors. I know it's going to make an impact and it'll hit the right people. And it just means
Mhm.
a lot that you would take the time to offer your insight and your wisdom.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you for, I can tell and I can feel based on how you show up to this call and also just based on the fact that you have this podcast that you really care about creatives. And I think that, like I said at the beginning, creatives really need somebody to care about them because it can be hard. So thank you for your compassion. Thank you for your awareness. And thank you for just taking care of the people who need it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All
Cool.
right. I will chat with you soon.
All right. Looking forward to it.